The Howell house watched Sarah. It had stood for centuries, a silent sentinel over the land, its dark windows like eyes that never blinked. She felt it from the moment she stepped inside. The air was thick with an unspoken history, a tapestry of lives once lived and now forgotten. Its gaze was heavy, oppressive. It was as if the very walls were imbued with the memories of those who had come before, their whispers echoing in the silence. Every creak of the floorboard, every sigh of the wind through the eaves seemed like the house was exhaling a breath she couldn't see. The house was alive, its wooden bones groaning under the weight of its own history. It was as though the structure itself was sentient, aware of her presence within its aged and groaning walls. The walls seemed to close in on her, each crack and crevice a testament to the passage of time. Sarah tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to her like cobwebs in a darkened attic. The more she tried to brush it away, the more it seemed to entangle her, wrapping her in a shroud of unease.
The air hung heavy, thick with the perfume of decay and the weight of forgotten memories. Each piece of furniture, each discarded item, told a story of a life once vibrant, now reduced to dust and shadows.
Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the gloom, each particle seeming to writhe with a life of its own. They moved in a slow, hypnotic dance, as if guided by an unseen hand. Sarah wandered through the rooms, her footsteps echoing in the silence like a drumbeat in a tomb. Each step she took seemed to reverberate through the house, a reminder of her intrusion into its sacred space. She ran her fingers along the dusty surfaces of furniture draped in white sheets, their shapes indistinct beneath the ghostly fabric. It was as if the house was hiding its secrets, shrouding them in layers of dust and time. The house pressed in on her, suffocating her with its silence and its watchful presence. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that seemed to scream in her ears.
She felt a chill crawl down her spine as though an unseen hand had brushed against her neck. The sensation was both terrifying and strangely intimate, as if the house was reaching out to her, trying to communicate.
The feeling intensified as she climbed the grand staircase, its once polished wood now rough and splintered beneath her touch. Each step was a journey deeper into the heart of the house, a descent into its dark, hidden soul. Each step was a labor, her breath catching in her throat as she ascended into the heart of the house's unsettling embrace. The higher she climbed, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the house was testing her resolve. She was certain that the house was observing her every move, its empty windows like vacant eyes following her progress. The broken glass seemed to glint with a malevolent intelligence, reflecting her own fear back at her. The feeling was unnerving, like being scrutinized by an unseen entity. It was a presence that was both everywhere and nowhere, a constant oppressive weight on her shoulders. Sarah couldn't shake the sensation that she was not alone, that something lurked in the shadows, watching and waiting. It was a feeling that gnawed at her, a primal fear that she couldn't rationalize or dismiss. She paused in front of an old ornate mirror, her reflection distorted and eerie. It was as if the mirror was a portal to another world, a world where the house's true nature was revealed. She reached out to touch the glass, and for a moment it seemed to ripple like water. The sensation was disorienting, as if the boundary between reality and illusion was blurring. Determined to uncover the house's secrets, Sarah turned away from the mirror and continued down the dark hallway. Each step was a challenge, but she was resolved to face whatever lay ahead. She came upon an old, locked door, its keyhole glowing faintly. It was a beacon in the darkness, a promise of answers if she could only find the key. After a thorough search, she found an old, rusty key hidden under a loose floorboard. It was as if the house had been waiting for her to find it, guiding her to this moment. With a deep breath, she inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a room shrouded in darkness and mystery. As she stepped into the room, a faint, eerie light illuminated her face. It was a light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, casting long, haunting shadows. The room was filled with old, dusty books and artifacts, each one a relic of a bygone era. There was a sense of ancient knowledge and power, a feeling that she had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. She picked up an old book, its cover embossed with strange symbols. The book felt heavy in her hands, as if it contained the weight of centuries of secrets. As she opened the book, she found pages filled with cryptic text and illustrations. It was a language she couldn't understand, but the images spoke to her on a primal level, revealing the house's dark history. A look of realization and fear crossed her face as she began to understand the true nature of the Howell house. It was not just a building, but a living entity, a guardian of ancient secrets and dark powers. With a newfound determination, she closed the book and prepared to leave the room. She knew that she had to escape the house's grasp, but she also knew that she could never truly leave its influence behind. As she walked down the hallway, she could feel the house watching her every move. It was a presence that she would carry with her forever, a reminder of the secrets she had uncovered and the darkness she had faced. The Howell house stood silent and foreboding, its dark windows like eyes that never blinked. It had watched her come, and now it watched her go, a silent sentinel over the land and its secrets. As Sarah walked away from the house, she felt a sense of relief mingled with lingering fear. She had faced the darkness within its walls, but she knew that the house would always be a part of her, a shadow that followed her wherever she went. The house remained a dark silhouette against the twilight sky, a monument to the secrets it held and the lives it had touched. It would continue to watch, to wait, a silent observer of the passage of time. Mrs. Ross, the caretaker, was a woman etched with time. Her presence in the old house was as much a part of its history as the walls and floors themselves. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line telling a story of years gone by, her eyes like faded blue marbles that seemed to hold ancient secrets. They were eyes that had seen much, perhaps too much. She spoke in hushed tones, her voice a dry rasp that echoed strangely in the stillness of the house. It was as if the very walls were listening, absorbing her words.
The house remembers. It remembers everything, every laugh, every tear, every whisper in the dark.
It's a beautiful old place, full of history, the kind of history that seeps into your bones and lingers in the air.
But Mrs. Ross only shook her head, her expression grave. She knew that beauty often masked darker truths.
History can be a heavy burden. It weighs on the soul, especially in a place like this. Especially in a place like this, where the past never truly lets go.
There was a warning in her voice, a sense of foreboding that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She tried to dismiss it as the ramblings of an old woman, but something in Mrs. Ross's demeanor told her there was more to it than that. There was a gravity in her words that couldn't be ignored. The way she spoke, the haunted look in her eyes, suggested a knowledge that ran deeper than mere superstition. It was as if she had seen things that defied explanation.
There are things you should know, things that have been hidden for too long, things about this house, about the people who lived here. Their stories are etched into the very fabric of this place.
She reached out and touched Sarah's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. It was a touch that conveyed urgency, a need to be heard.
Be careful, child. This house holds many secrets, and not all of them are meant to be uncovered. Some secrets are best left buried. They are like old wounds that should not be reopened, for fear of what might come out. But Sarah was determined. She felt a strange connection to the house, a pull that she couldn't quite explain. She knew she had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Mrs. Ross watched her go, a look of resignation on her face. She knew that some paths, once taken, could not be retraced. As the shadows lengthened and the house seemed to sigh with the weight of its memories, Sarah steeled herself for what lay ahead. The whispers from the past were growing louder, and she was ready to listen. With a deep breath, she turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open, stepping into the unknown. The hallway stretched out before her, dark and dusty, with light streaming through a crack in the door at the far end. She took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and her resolve, Sarah ventured deeper into the house, ready to face whatever secrets it held. She paused in front of an old family portrait, her eyes drawn to the young woman in the picture. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at the edges of Sarah's memory. She reached out and touched the portrait, her fingers brushing the surface. A shiver ran through her as she felt a connection, a link to the past that she couldn't quite explain. With a determined look on her face, Sarah turned away from the portrait and continued her journey. The whispers from the past were calling, and she was ready to answer.
The Howell family, Mrs. Ross explained, had vanished without a trace. It was a story that had been passed down through generations, a chilling tale that had become part of the town's folklore. One day they were there, the picture of prosperity and happiness. The next they were gone, swallowed whole by the walls of their own home. The Howells were well known in the community, a family that seemed to have it all. They were the epitome of the American dream, with their beautiful homes, successful careers, and loving relationships. It happened in the dead of night, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. No one heard a sound, no one saw a thing. The Howells' house, once filled with laughter and life, was now a silent tomb. The neighbors, who had always felt safe and secure, were now gripped by a sense of unease. They simply disappeared, leaving behind an eerie silence and a mystery that had haunted the town ever since. The house stood as a grim reminder of their absence, its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the void.
There were whispers, of course, rumors that spread like wildfire through the small community. People speculated endlessly, each theory more outlandish than the last. The town was a cauldron of fear and suspicion, with everyone looking over their shoulders. Some said the Howells had met with foul play, that they had been victims of a robbery gone wrong. The idea of a violent crime sent shivers down the spines of the townsfolk, who had always considered their community to be a safe haven. Others whispered of darker things, of ancient curses and malevolent forces at work. Stories of old, forgotten rituals and vengeful spirits began to resurface, adding a supernatural element to the already terrifying mystery. But no one knew for sure what had become of the family. The police investigation turned up nothing, no clues, no leads. It was as if the Howells had been erased from existence, leaving behind only questions and heartache. They had simply vanished, leaving behind a void that no amount of speculation could fill. The house, once a symbol of their success, was now a monument to their mysterious fate.
Mrs. Ross's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as she recounted the details of the family's disappearance. She had lived in the town her entire life and had seen many things, but nothing quite like this. But Sarah could sense the underlying current of fear, the unspoken dread that clung to the old woman like a shroud. It was as if Mrs. Ross knew more than she was letting on, but was too afraid to speak the full truth. It was clear that Mrs. Ross believed there was more to the story than met the eye, something sinister and unexplained. The way she spoke, with a haunted look in her eyes, suggested that the mystery of the Howells' disappearance was far from over. The Howell family's disappearance had cast a long shadow over the house, a pall of mystery and tragedy that seemed to seep from the very walls. The house had become a place of fear, avoided by all but the bravest souls.
Who were the Howells? They were more than just a family. They were a part of the community's fabric. Their absence left a hole that could never be filled. What had happened to them? Theories abounded, but none could explain the complete and utter disappearance of an entire family. It was as if they had been swallowed by the earth itself. And why did their disappearance still hold such power over the town, even after all these years? The mystery of the Howells had become a legend, a story told to frighten children and keep adults awake at night. It was a reminder that even in the most idyllic of places, darkness could lurk just beneath the surface. Life in the town continued, but the shadow of the Howells' disappearance never fully lifted. It was a story that would be told and retold, a cautionary tale of the unknown and the unknowable. The local newspaper ran stories year after year, trying to keep the memory alive, hoping that one day the truth would come to light. But as time passed, the details grew hazy, and the line between fact and fiction blurred. Every year, on the anniversary of their disappearance, the town held a vigil. Candles were lit, prayers were said, and for one night, the Howells were remembered not as a mystery, but as a family who had once been a part of the community. In the attic of the Howell house, their belongings still lay untouched, a time capsule of their lives. It was as if they had just stepped out for a moment and would return at any second. Letters, photographs, and personal items told the story of a family that had once been full of life and love. These remnants were all that was left, a poignant reminder of what had been lost. As the town settled into the quiet of the night, the story of the Howells lingered in the air, a ghostly presence that refused to be forgotten. The mystery of their disappearance remained unsolved, a puzzle that would continue to haunt the town for generations to come. And so, under the watchful eye of the full moon, the town slept, with the unanswered questions of the Howell's fate whispering through the night, a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved.